Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Devin Bandara, CEO and CEO at Nirvana Labs, where their mission is to enlighten blockchain infrastructure, which he'll dive into loads of information in his background and not only what he's built prior, but also what he's building now. So Devin, thank you so much for joining the show. Before we get into Nirvana Labs and what you're working on currently, what were you doing before you started the company?
Yeah. So, before we decided to start Nirvana Labs, we were going by Aegis Studio, and it was a blockchain consulting firm. So we do development, architecture, design for other Web3 companies or Web2 companies entering the space. And we were doing that for a while, and we saw that basically all the tools we're using are really and or don't work. So we were paid thousands and thousands of dollars a month to build these blockchain dApps for our customers or for ourselves. And the time to build them was exponentially longer because of the dependence on these third party providers. And then we found out that the third party providers themselves are using just all centralized services and creating a huge single point of failure. The biggest point when we saw this was a huge problem was, if you remember the Bored Ape Other Side NFT drop, if you recall, they were saying it's problems with Ethereum's breaking. If your node wasn't running on AWS at that time, you had no issues. There was an AWS outage. So if you take a look at OpenSea's uptime graph, and they have their blockchain providers, Alchemy, and Alchemy's uptime graph and US uptime graph, it looks all the same because it's all using AWS. And so everybody that was on those nodes couldn't get or send transactions, versus us and other providers that weren't using AWS. The very few of us were able to do just fine. We were getting transactions, metadata, everything. Yeah. And I still have the tweets up, timestamp from when everybody was like, I can't get any transactions. And I'm like, here's mine.
Yeah. I love that. What got you into blockchain originally? And I like to ask this question. I know it's kind of general, but I feel like everyone kind of has their moment where they saw this new technology, how really I would say innovative is a word, disruptive is a word, but it's really just taking and creating a new foundation, and more up-to-date foundation on a lot of the technology we already have existing, and also finding a new way to connect with it. But what, in your mind, what got you excited about it? And when was that moment?
Yeah. I kind of got into blockchain accidentally. One of my first jobs was as a blockchain, at a blockchain startup, but it wasn't a blockchain startup when I started at this place. It was a real estate startup, and it was a real estate tech startup. And then they pivoted into fitting blockchain into their business model to, it was mostly a ploy to get more funding because it was the buzzword. So I was actually the lead engineer, even though I was it was one of my first jobs. And they were like, yeah, you have to manage 2 smart contract engineers now. And I'm like, I don't know what smart contracts are. So let me figure that out. But yeah, I've always been on the job learning very quickly. One time I got hired as a JavaScript engineer, and then they were 2 weeks into the role, they're like, you're doing C# and .NET now. I'm like, oh, okay. I've never done that before. I couldn't even do it on my MacBook. I had to get a new computer. They had to send me a Windows and switch it out.
Funny.
But yeah, I got in doing at this real estate startup, and it never ended up going anywhere. But I met some cool people working at that company, and met some connections in the blockchain industry. And that's kind of how I got my exposure. But then for 2 years, this was back in 2018, 2 years, I didn't do any blockchain stuff. I was doing .NET C# for pharmaceutical companies and accounting companies, super boring stuff. I even was senior engineer at Northwestern Mutual Insurance for 4 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And I got there and I was like, all right, what are we building, guys? And they're like, yeah, just mostly forms, just forms here. Yeah. I was like, gosh, well, I should have known. What was I thinking? So I didn't stay there long. I actually just quit and I started Aegis Studio. Aegis Studio was just a consulting company, not Web3, just Web2, building mobile apps, e-commerce platforms, the normal stuff, but we would do it in a better way. Like we used like React headless components to build
Yeah.
the store out versus like using Shopify. So we do
Yeah.
things like a little bit more custom, but we just got more work and more requests for blockchain projects. And then all of the engineers that I met, working on a blockchain startup, they saw that we were getting traction doing blockchain projects. So naturally they joined the team, we grew. So the team that's been at Aegis, that's been making, all these projects, we've just now focused on making one project, Nirvana Labs, for the past year. We haven't taken any clients, and we've just been focusing on getting this product out to the market. Last month was our official like launch date, and it's been a rough year with everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
But we've been making the best of like, especially even like in the bear market, we're a cheaper and faster product. So when you're a cheaper and faster product, you can help companies save money on their bottom line. And a lot of companies that were running their own nodes before now have no longer have like the manpower to run those nodes anymore because they've had, downsizing, and we can come in, help them save even more money because we have 24/7 support engineers that no matter, where you are in the world, we can always have somebody help you.
Yeah. And describe, you're discussing it to me before show, but describe the problem specifically and how you've kind of enabled Nirvana Labs and your team to help companies save on their bottom line and honestly create a quicker solution for a lot of the technology that you're running.
Yeah. I mean, so when we were paying for all these services, we were like, it's just not working. There's got to be a better way to do this. What we did was we focus on vertical integration with as much open source and like our own technology as possible, and not grabbing things off the shelf and taking shortcuts to build quicker. I mean, that's why it took a year.
Yeah.
But because we thought about everything like very thoughtfully before we went to do this build, every single thing is already accounted for. Example, MetaMask, you saw that like Infura does a lot of IP logging, and they actually sell that data to Google Analytics and Facebook Pixel, like through their integrations that they have to use to do analytics. And we have a completely in-house logging stack. So everything runs in our control plane where your logs don't leave our servers. And we actually give the option for our enterprise clients to turn logging off. So we can't even see anything, and we don't keep any of those logs. So we've been privacy focused from the beginning. We've been focused on providing green energy from the beginning. But the biggest problem we're solving is like 70% of blockchain nodes, around 67 or something like that. It's gotten a little lower, but more than 50% of blockchain nodes run on Amazon Web Services. And Amazon Web Services is one company, and they have their own opinions about blockchain that may not align with the rest of the Web3 community. So we were like, we need to create a Web3 provider and a cloud provider that is focused on Web3 and has an ethos aligned with Web3. And the other biggest thing is like the areas in the world that people are developers in, like there's so many developers in Africa and Asia and South America. And we have nodes in all of those places that none of these other competitors have.
Yeah.
And we charge a lot less for the data transfer fees out of those nodes because we see that it's a really expensive when, you can get an EC2 instance from Amazon, but if you start running a lot of stuff through it, you're going to see thousands of dollars in outbound data transfer fees. Like you'll see with us, it'll be like hundreds. So it's like, it's a big difference, hundreds to thousands, how much we're saving people money. And when you can save people money on their infrastructure, they can spend more money on development. And if they have a tool that works better, they can build faster. So it's just overall, we were thinking, how can we make the most impact to the Web3 community as a whole? So this is our way of doing it, improving the infrastructure and giving like Web3 developers better tools to build with. So it's like better APIs to get like NFT data, latency times are lower so that NFT traders and or just crypto traders and any blockchain and analytics providers, they can get that data very quickly and act upon it very quickly, send out transactions quickly. We also have like extra APIs that nobody else offers, like rarity calculations. And we saw a lot of NFT traders and crypto traders trade off the news. So we have an endpoint that actually just type in the name of the token, and if it's a ERC20 or a 721, and then it gets you all the news data all about that token with sentiment analysis and sentiment polarity on it. So you know, like, how
Yeah.
the sentiment of a token is doing.
Yeah.
And those are the things that people like can use to build way better apps.
Yeah.
So that's our main focus.
Yeah. Well, and in regards to that, are you building just better, more efficient technology around the development process and access to this data? Or are you just piecing the components together more efficiently using like MetaMask and these other tools, integrating them well within this kind of, I don't want to say out of the box solution, but almost like this prepackaged for these developers to work on? Are you, or is it both?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, how I see it is like we're like a base level provider for other developers to build tools off of. So, for example, when you're using MetaMask, you need to have access to a node to send or receive transactions on MetaMask. By default, it's an Infura node that you're connecting to because MetaMask and Infura are like both consensus products. But you can go into the settings and you can replace that node with a Nirvana Labs node, for example. So even if you're not a Web3 developer, you can get benefit by using our product. For example, you get faster transactions, higher transaction success rates and finality, and you're better protected from things like front running, sandwich attacks, and you have better privacy because we are not out selling your data.
Yeah. Well, describe the different attacks again. You said sandwich attacks and front running. Can you break those down? What is, if I'm the user, why would I be afraid of those?
Yeah, it's basically, so the same thing happens in like the traditional TradFi markets, traditional finance markets. They're called like dark pools and high frequency trading. It's basically like scalping. Like if you are about to buy $100 of Apple stock, the algorithms that these companies are running will identify that are about to buy for $100, or there is somebody about to buy for $100, and they'll go buy for $98 and sell it to you for $100 in 5 milliseconds, very quickly.
Yeah.
So that, and they're out of the sale, in another millisecond. So there's things you can leverage like flash loans in DeFi, and you can get very aggressive with how you do those micro transactions, and you can basically pull liquidity out from people mid transaction. In the traditional finance world, there's a lot more regulations and protections to make sure that, it's not as unfair. It's still very unfair for like, if you're a day trader going against an HFT or a proprietary or with a hedge fund, you still don't have that good of a chance. But, in DeFi right now, anything can happen because there's no regulations, and you need some levels of protection and levels of privacy against, when you don't know what could happen to, your MetaMask in the next 6 months right now.
Yeah. Is it, when you're talking about pulling out, some liquidity during the transaction, is that due to the latency of the transaction and how long it takes to actually complete, and during that time of exposure, or what is it?
Yeah, it has to do with, it's called the EVM, Ethereum virtual machine, and there's called maximum extractable value. If you look up MEV bot, Ethereum, that's basically the protocol that a lot of these front runners and like arbitrage traders are using. You're basically almost like bribing miners to get in front of the line. That's what it means to front run your order. You're basically beating people in the front of the line by having a faster node and having, a better connection to the mining pool and convincing them that you should be in the front of the line.
Yeah. What is the process like for companies who set up nodes in a decentralized fashion? And essentially, how do you create security around that when it's not centralized? And how do you maintain the quality of service when you're extending your network of nodes out? Because I'm assuming there's nodes everywhere. You said if you're a developer in Africa or in Asia, there's going to be nodes in your area that they can access. But how do you set up security, and how do you, verify quality or keep quality high for those nodes?
I guess, how do we do it, or how would like a typical company go about it?
I guess both. Yeah. If there's a difference.
Yeah. I mean, so typically you would want to pick a cloud service and hire engineers that are knowledgeable in that cloud service, whether it's Google or Amazon or Microsoft these days. Those are the big ones. And then you build everything around the proprietary services offered by that cloud service. You're locked into that one cloud service. And then it's advantageous for people to do it this way versus you use 3 different cloud services, because the amount that you get by lumping it into one cloud service is greater, right? So that gives people the almost incentive to be centralized at that point.
Right.
So we want to help take that away, but still offer that same volume discount by being a cloud agnostic provider and eventually decentralizing. But in terms of security, how we do things, we're actually partnered with a company called Signal Sciences. And they have, hundreds of security engineers, and all of their stuff is built off open source technology, as well as all these engineers are always training new models and looking at new malicious like attack vectors, malicious IPs, OWASP attacks. And that keeps our nodes safe at like the node level, at the metal level. So no transaction can go through our nodes without going through that firewall first. And that firewall is cloud agnostic firewall. So that means we can deploy it any one of the clouds or data center providers that we operate in. We built everything in a way that we can deploy it in about a year. When we do our decentralized protocol, it's going to be where any person with compute, storage, networking can join the protocol and start providing their resources and getting paid for those resources. The way we do that is by using what's called zero trust containerized computing. So it's basically, we don't have to trust the devices that the code is running on, because we've containerized it into like a safe environment. There's a lot of things that you can do to improve security, but most companies, what they do is they just lock into the cloud provider and rely on the cloud provider to give them that security, but it just creates a very large level of centralization. So we go with as many open source solutions as possible, stuff that we don't have to pay, per request or per gigabyte for, so that we can scale much quicker and more economies of scale. When you look at price chart of Nirvana versus AWS, the AWS one goes like this once you go, way up there on the stream, but ours is a very like linear curve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, first of all, that's super badass. The way not only the way you structured it, but how in the philosophy of how you structured it, it kind of creates a more decentralized experience, how it should be, and less focus on, a decentralized entity to really govern anything, because, that's, I guess, kind of polarized from the actual antithesis of why blockchain was built. But more so, I guess, just being, someone who provides infrastructure for developers who are building applications, just out of complete curiosity, what are some popular dApps or protocols that people are building? And then 2, what are some sneaky ones that you're particularly maybe more excited about?
Right now, I see, the biggest place I see people building right now is actually Avalanche.
Yeah.
And I think Avalanche has a lot of potential, especially with their subnets now.
Yeah.
I see a lot of Web2 companies entering the space, and they're all deploying either Avalanche subnets or Polygon supernodes, which are approximately the same thing. What they allow you to do is basically run your own high performance blockchain on top of their blockchain. So it's very advantageous for gaming companies getting in the space. And we're seeing a lot of big gaming companies moving into the space and purchasing a lot of infrastructure because they want to get real-time transactions all over the world to provide a good user experience. So we help them with that. And they want to also run on their own subnets so that they're not congesting the main network with their transactions that are happening very quickly. You can have what's called a higher transactions per second, higher TPS, when you're running one of these subnets or superheads. So that's the biggest trend we're seeing. A lot of people are getting into that because it's still decentralized, but you have a finer level of control on like who gets to host your nodes and how many nodes you have. So you get to decide that as like a protocol or a company.
Tell me about your traction. How many companies are you working with? What's exciting about not only you launched last month, what's the growth look like? How many people are using the infrastructure and are starting to build? Yeah, tell us where you are now and kind of what the projections are for the near future.
Yeah. So we just launched last month. We haven't done really any paid marketing campaigns or anything like. A lot of the initial customers came from, just the network effect of Aegis Studio and our and previous clients and network relationships. But yeah, we have just a couple hundred active daily users, and then we have a handful of enterprise companies that are purchasing a lot of compute. We're focusing on that enterprise sales side. We do want to help, as many smaller dev shops and developers as possible that are building. So we make our free tiers like really advantageous, but we may not have like all of the bells and whistles that other providers have right now just because we're new. But that's why we're focusing on the enterprise side, so that we just have the basics done that the enterprise really wants done well and for cheap, because they build on all of the other services on top. So for example, we're talking to companies that would be typically a competitor of ours as a node provider, but they're currently using AWS. So AWS has no thought or mind about them as a customer, but we do. We take, more careful approach to handling them as a customer and giving them more attention. And obviously we have people that are knowledgeable in Web3 to help them if anything ever goes wrong. And that is just like a winning scenario. It's like a win for enterprise companies and for smaller Web3 companies. So we're just trying to push that out to as many people as possible without blowing up our marketing budget, because then we have to charge more.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the biggest risks that Nirvana Labs faces today?
I mean, the biggest risks is definitely like legislation, what kind of route we head towards in terms of like, will blockchain be banned, or will, that's really the biggest risk that we face as an infrastructure provider. We're pretty kind of shielded from a lot of these market conditions. For example, enterprise products, we do yearly contracts for, or multi-year contracts for, but I've always been in the kind of business of like selling the picks and shovels. So we're selling the tools for the people to build with. So those tools are used, all the time, whether the market's up or you still need to get data about the market and send data to the market. So our nodes are, the place where you go to do that.
Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Nirvana Labs?
The long-term vision right now. So a lot of people have been asking, you guys are decentralizing infrastructure at the, infrastructure. How are you different from AWS, which also has, data centers around the world? How we answer that question is, one, we work with a lot, like as many providers as possible, as well as our long-term goal is to become a decentralized protocol. And the reason we are not a decentralized protocol today is because we don't have any utility to offer as a decentralized protocol today. So we're not going to do that too early. We saw, for example, like Pocket Network is like another company that did a decentralized infrastructure network. They released their token like before anything, and the token did nothing but staking and yield farming. So we're not going that route. When we release our token, you will be able to download something onto any of your devices, benchmark it, get the uptime, the response time, the latency, the compute, storage, and networking power, and get like a real number of, you're getting paid this many tokens per minute for hosting your device. And that's an immediate utility. So until we have that fully tested and ready, we're not going to be decentralized. And we also want to achieve that network effect as a reliable provider with services as a centralized provider, just as one person or one party, one company providing these services before we let everybody else, into the marketplace. Our long-term goal is to build a Web3 public cloud that everyone has access to, because the biggest thing like that I see when I talk to developers overseas is, hey, I gotta like go to a cafe and like schedule time and buy gigabytes of bandwidth to get your GitHub project done. And I'm like, dude, that's crazy. That's a next level. Like I'm over here watching like TikTok videos, just wasting gigabytes, like not even thinking. So, and that's because of huge telecommunications, like basically monopolies in parts of the world that, they could just put another fiber optic line down and just get around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could be saving, they could be paying pennies for what they're paying, hundreds of dollars for it, because just one company has decided to monopolize infrastructure and telecommunications. So long-term plan is to drive the cost of compute, storage, and networking down to near zero, because we're going to increase the supply since everyone is a supplier.
Yeah. What, just from founder to founder, what do you do outside of the day to day that keeps you kind of still, rejuvenated enough to continue building and like going through the challenges and going through the ups and downs?
I'm always building.
Yeah.
I'm an
It's like
immigrant
nothing.
kid. Like, I moved here from Sri Lanka, was born in Sri Lanka. It is a civil war when I left, and thankfully it's over now. That gives you just that mindset. You got to be thankful to be here, because it was really hard to get here. We had a green card lottery system, and I got so many relatives back home. And especially looking at Sri Lanka right now, it's in terrible shape. Like, the government collapsed earlier this year. Like, there's import shortages of everything, including food and like fuel. So I'm trying to do as much as I can, as quickly as I can, to, make the biggest impact.
Yeah. What's something that you weren't good at early on as a founder that you're better at now?
Definitely like delegating stuff. I'm more of like, all right, can you do this? Never mind, I'm just going to do it. Like I just do it myself.
Yeah.
So I've been a lot like learning how to delegate more, and, have better use of my time as the leader of the company. I probably shouldn't be working on CSS code, right? Like, this is probably a bad use of my time, but I used to just be like, this text box is just bothering me, so like, I don't do that stuff anymore. I try to, put my time where it can have the most impact.
Yeah. I always like to ask this question to founders, one for selfish research purposes, but for the audience as well. Whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
That's a tough one. I watch a lot of podcasts. One that I really like is Gary Tan from Initialized Capital. Chamath, I've been following recently a lot too. He's also from Sri Lanka like me. Similar story. And the other one, Naval Ravikant, he's also has some really insightful, podcasts, talks, video. But yeah, those are the three like main ones I've been following recently.
Yeah.
It changes from time to time. I like to get, opinions, information from all over the place so that I can form a really good idea. But I've always been just learning from the internet. Always been an internet kid. Like, I built my first PC when I was like 11 or 12, just like out of like old broken Dell workstations that like, have all the green plastic on them inside. So you literally like cut it out. So I've burned so many like office, like graphics cards trying to play Minecraft that I torrented. That was like my first like getting into technology. Was like, I just wanted to play games and I didn't have money to pay for it. So I was like, how do I get the games?
I love that, man. Well, thank you so much. I know we're at the end of the episode. We could talk, I think, hours and hours on different subjects around building, but also what you're doing and how it's disrupting, really just like allowing access to more people, which I think is the whole reason why I believe blockchain and Web3 technology, decentralized technology is just going to be successful just by pure numbers of access. So I hope you enjoyed yourself. And Devin, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
No, I really liked it. This is my first podcast I've done for Nirvana Labs, and it is really easy. You asked some good questions and definitely let me get my point across here.
Cool, man. All right. Well, until next time.
All right. Catch you later.